Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim daf Lamed Hey. Today's daf is sponsored by Tova and David Kestemam in honor of the marriage of their son Gilad to Noah Goldrich today. Maybe they be zoche to build a bayit ne'eman b'Yisrael in good health until 120. Today's daf is also sponsored by Emma Rimberg in loving memory of her dear friend Helen Taylor, whose yahrzeit is today, and in honor of her dear friend Tova Kestemam, whose son is getting married today. Double mazal. Okay, we're going to get started as a quick review of what we were up to. Rav Chia bar Avin had asked Rava the following question in Lamed Dalet Amud Bet, Ki kari alecha, if I say my loaf is forbidden to you, and then I give it to you as a gift. So when I said my loaf, did I mean only as long as it's my loaf? But if I give it to you as a gift, it's yours and you can use it. Or did I mean my loaf is forbidden to you? I was trying to preclude you from bothering me to give it to you as a gift by saying my loaf is forbidden to you. And therefore, even if I gave it to you as a gift, my point was, I don't really want to give this to you as a gift because I don't want you benefiting from my loaf. And it's still considered my loaf to the extent that you're going to be forbidden. So Rava tried to prove, Chia bar Avin had some issue with his proof, but Rava basically held that you cannot benefit from it if I said these words. My loaf is forbidden to you, then I give it to you as a gift. It's still considered that I meant to forbid it to you, even though it's no longer my loaf. So now the Gemara starts off with a question on Rava, Eitive. So we're going to now question Rava from a tannaitic source. Eitive is almost always used as a tannaitic source, trying to contradict what an Emorah said. Amarlo, very similar situation, but a little bit different. Hash'ileni paratcha. So you say to me, please lend me your cow. Amarlo, konam parazeh shani kanoi lecha. It's a bit of a strange language, but basically what I'm saying is my para is konam to you, my para that was kanoi to me, that's been mine for many years, forbidden to you. So this is very similar, different words, but it's basically saying ki kari alech, right? So we're going to see what's going to happen later on in this braita is even if I give it to you as a gift, it's still going to be forbidden to you, and it's going to be permitted to you, and that's going to go against Rava. Okay, because again, the language is my para, and we're going to see that when it gets given to you as a gift, it's no longer my para and it's permitted, which is going to be exactly against Rava, but we have a little while till we get to that part. Nichasai alecha im yesh li para elazo. Again, a little bit of a strange language, but what I'm saying is all my possessions will be forbidden to you if I have another cow, meaning I have only one cow, and therefore you can't borrow my cow because I need my cow and I don't have any more. And I'm basically swearing in the language of a neder, but I'm vowing that if I have another para, all my property will be forbidden to you, basically saying, stop bothering me about renting my para. I don't have one for you. Hash'ileni, we're going to see in a minute that even if, maybe I'll already tell you this, even if I have a para, and I was lying basically, like I was basically saying, I don't have any other one, and I'm so sure of it that everything of mine will be forbidden if I do have another one, right? If I don't have another one, if I do have another one, then how do you say, im yesh li para elazo, right? If I don't have any other one, basically what we're saying is, no matter what I have, it doesn't matter, because what I really meant in my vow was my cow's forbidden to you, okay? Even though I have more cows. And then this wasn't even true, but I have more cows and I kind of lied here, but it's not like I was lying. I was really just trying to deter you from bothering me about this. Next case, same thing, just instead of a para, we're talking about a kardom, which is a type of axe. Hash'ileni kadom chara ho or something. Maybe you can tell me the exact translation. I don't remember exactly, but it's some sort of implement like a shovel type thing. Hash'ileni kadom cha amarlo. Kona, a spade. Okay, that was the word I couldn't think of. Thank you. A spade. Lend me your spade. Amarlo, konam, kardom, sheyeshli, shani kanoi. Okay, again, a bit of a strange language, but basically what it means is my spade is forbidden to you. Nichasai alayim yeshli kardom elazeh. My nechasim will be forbidden to you if I have anything other than this, meaning again, I definitely have no other one, and therefore can't give you my spade. V'nimtza sheyeshlo, here the words of the braita are, and it turns out I even had one. B'chayav asu. As long as I'm alive, you can't benefit. Mate, but if I died, then it's no longer mine. Once I die, even though my heirs inherit it from me, my vow is no longer relevant. Oh, shenitna lo b'matana. Or it was given to you as a gift. Harei mutar. What do you see here? Gift. It becomes permitted. Wait a minute. This is exactly against Rava. You said it in the language mine. As soon as it's not mine, I gave it to you as a gift. It's permitted. So there you have it. Goes right against Rava. Rav Ashi Rav Ika. He says, no. You misunderstood this braita. Now, the word natna or nitna, I read it the way the Gemara eventually reads it. It's written the same way. But nitna means it was given. And natna means I gave it to you. There's a big difference. So comes Rav Ashi and he says, shenitna lo al yedei acher. It was given to you as a gift by somebody else. When the braita said, if it was given to you as a gift, it's permitted, that's when there was someone in the middle. So, and now we're going to learn that not only if I died, but if I gave it to somebody else, I gave it to my friend, I didn't want this kardom anymore. Years later, I decide I don't want it. I give it to my friend or I give him my cat. And then that friend gifted it to you later. Well, then already it's no longer mine. It's only going to be a problem, and this supports Rava, if I give it directly to you as a gift. That was what I was trying to prevent. Stop bothering me to give this to you as a gift. I'm not giving it to you as a gift, and even if I do, you won't be able to use it. But once I give it to somebody else and it's no longer mine, then it doesn't matter what happens after. If you get it later as a gift, it's yours. It's fine. Even Rava will agree with that. And in fact, Rav Ashi konam, he says, and you can even prove this, because note the language in the braita. And now it's clear that they had a version that said nitna, not natna, which is the katane shenitna lo v'lo katane shenatna lo. Because it was given, and it doesn't say you gave it to him, okay, or to her. So that's what we did the first section. Okay, and we're now moving on to something else entirely. We're going back to meila, which we talked about in hekdesh and all that, which we kind of gotten into yesterday a little bit. But basically, we had kikari, alecha. We had a question. Rava answered it. Rav Chia rejected his proof. And then we brought a question against Rava, but we resolved the question against Rava. That braita doesn't contradict Rava. Rava me Rav Nachman. This time Rava asked Rav Nachman a question. Last time it was Rava was being asked the question. Here Rava asks it. Yesh meila bekonamot olo. If I say konam kikar zo alai or konam kikar zo alaich, okay, whatever it is, I forbid my loaf of bread to me, to you, doesn't matter. Now we talked about the difference between hekdesh and neder in the beginning of the Masechet. We said, what's the difference? The main difference is that neder can be limited to a person or to a group of people, whereas hekdesh is for everybody. If I say my loaf is hekdesh, then it's sanctified. I can't, and nobody is allowed to benefit from it. It's not just a certain group of people. It's sanctified. It's God's at this point. It's not, no one can use it. You can also do pidyon, you can redeem it, right? Which we didn't really talk about in neder. Hold off, because we're going to get there today. But which means that if I say this loaf is hekdesh, the Beit HaMikdash doesn't really need my loaf of bread. So what will I do? I'm going to redeem it onto money. I have to pay the amount plus an extra fifth and bring that money to the temple. That's really what I meant. The value of this loaf is hekdesh. And then I do pidyon, and then the loaf is no longer forbidden to anybody. It's not hekdesh anymore, and the money is. So now Rava asked Rav Nachman the following question. When I say konam kikar zo alai, or konam kikar zo to you, or whatever I said it to, whoever, konam is like korban, and korban, right? We said the language of a vow could be korban, and korban is sanctified. So does that mean that, let's say I go against the vow and I use it, or the vow is on you and you use it? Is there meila? Does that mean if you use it accidentally, you didn't realize, let's say I forbade it to you and you didn't realize that I forbade it to you, you didn't know, or you forgot, or I forgot that it was forbidden to myself, and then I use it, I go against my vow, did I transgress the laws of meila, which would mean I'd have to bring an asham meilo to guilt offering, and I would have to bring its value to the temple plus an additional fifth. Is that true for konamot or not? Amar lei. So Rav Nachman says, let's learn it from our Mishna. Hanitua, from where? Makom shenotlim aleha sachal. Remember the case, I can't benefit from you, and you want to return me my lost item, and normally you take money for that kind of thing, but you decided not to charge me. What did we say? since I can't benefit from you, tipol hana'ah lehekdesh. Now, all of a sudden, why did hekdesh appear there in the Mishnah? Why does it have to go to the temple? Why can't we just say the money, right? Generally, when we talk about if there's something I can't benefit from, we generally say throw it in the Dead Sea, okay? Doesn't necessarily have to go to the temple. Why does it have to go to the temple? Who says it's sanctified? So comes Rav Nachman and says, what do you see here? L'meimra ki hekdesh. We see here that it's hekdesh, that anything that's forbidden is basically hekdesh. So that money is forbidden because that was benefit I gained from you and I was not allowed to benefit from you. And what does it say? I have to bring that money to the temple. That means that items that are sanctified, if I were to get benefit from you and I'm not allowed to, that is hekdesh, okay? Ma hekdesh yesh bo meila, af konam yesh bo meila. So if it's like hekdesh, well, then it's going to be like hekdesh across the board. Just like hekdesh, if you misuse consecrated property, you have to bring, you're liable for meila. Likewise here, if you use something you weren't allowed to use, that you vowed against, or that you vowed against for someone else, and they used it, it's meila. So now the Gemara says, well, what Rav Nachman said is actually a tannaitic debate. Kitanai. Here's the machloka between the Tanaim. Konam kikar zo hekdesh va'achala. We're going to give two kinds of konam. Konam, this kikar is hekdesh. That means forbidden to everybody. So in this neder, I've forbade this loaf to everybody in the world. Ve'achala, and it was eaten, okay? Beinhu, whether the person who made the neder ate it, o bein chavero, or anybody in the world ate it, ma'al. Again, assuming they did it unwittingly, they didn't realize, that's meila. Leficha yesh la pidyon. Therefore, now they make another jump. They say, well, number one, we saw it was hekdesh from our Mishna, right? So, you pull a hekdesh, that means it's hekdesh. Then we say, well, if it's hekdesh, that means there's meila. If there's meila, that means there's pidyon, okay? Which is, everything builds on the other. Once we're comparing it to hekdesh, we're going to say that whatever's true for hekdesh is true for this as well. So, if it has laws of meila, it must also have laws of pidyon, which you never really thought of before. If I forbid my loaf to you, and then we redeem it with a coin, the coin, the money, its financial value, the money becomes forbidden to you to benefit from, but the bread actually is permitted to you. Because once it goes into regular laws of hekdesh, then all the laws of hekdesh apply that it can be redeemed. That was case number one in the braita. Case number two, kikar zo alai lehekdesh. Most people say hekdesh, okay, either which way. If it's hekdesh, there's a difference between the versions. I'm not going to get into it. But kikar zo alai is the main thing here. If I say this kikar is hekdesh, for me, this kikar for me is hekdesh, okay, or for you, right, but not to everybody. Ve'achala, and then whoever it was forbidden to ate it. Hu ma'al chavero lo ma'al. So if it was forbidden to me and I ate it, I'm liable for meila. But you, if you ate it, you're not, because it's not forbidden to you. I only forbade it to myself. And likewise, if it was the reverse, if it was only forbidden to you, you would eat it, you would be liable for meila, I would eat it, nothing would happen to me. Now from here you see, it's somewhat hekdesh. It's not fully hekdesh, because if it was fully hekdesh, it would be forbidden to everyone. And therefore, lefichach ein la pidyon. In this case, you can't redeem it. Now we understand why we didn't really bring up redemption until now, because, right, you think we're on page 35. This often happens in the Masechtot that you only find things out later on, but still you would have thought that this concept of pidyon, redeeming an item, would have come up at some point. But it's very rare because most vows are not forbidding things to the whole world. So pidyon is only relevant when it's forbidden like hekdesh, where it's going to be to everybody. Whereas usually the Nedarim we've been discussing are just for a particular person, either for yourself or for somebody else. So that makes sense then that it didn't come up. But basically this opinion, which we're going to see in a second, is Rabbi Meir. This is Divrei Rabbi Meir, is that if there's konam and you forbade something in a vow, basically laws of hekdesh kick in, at least partially, right? So to the extent that there's meila, if there's meila to everybody because everyone's forbidden, then there's going to be pidyon. You can also redeem it. If not, and it's only to individuals, then there's no laws of pidyon. But yes, there's laws of meila. You accidentally use this item that you're not allowed to use. You have to do all the laws of meila, guilt offering, pay the money, plus an extra fifth to the temple. Chachamim omrim, How did we start this braita? We said, it's a machloket tanaim, whether there's meila or not. Rav Nachman said there was. But Rav Nachman holds like Rabbi Meir. And the rabbis disagree. And the rabbis say, there's no laws of meila by a vow. A vow is a vow, and hekdesh is hekdesh. They're two totally different things. Obviously, he would assume, the rabbis would then say also there's no pidyon. You can't redeem it, even if you forbade it to everybody. So now I want to look in the Ran for a minute. The Ran starts off after Now, normally we hold like the rabbis. I want to point out something methodologically in terms of how we paskin halacha from a Gemara. So the Ran says, "U'le'inyan halacha, kaimalan k'Rabbi Meir, v'yesh meila b'konam." Now, normally when you have an individual arguing with a group of people, normally we hold by the majority. So we usually hold by the rabbis. So we have to figure out what motivated the Ran to say halacha Rabbi Meir. We don't have to work hard on it because the Ran himself explains, which is why I wanted to read this. Number one, Daha Rav Nachman pashat le Rava mimatnitin sheyesh meila. Well, our sugya seems to indicate that there's meila because Rav Nachman paskin that way. So if Rav Nachman answered Rava, that already gives, like let's say it's a game and you have two sides and 2 points to that side because Rav Nachman already held that way. So we have this machloket tanaim, and then we look back, well, Rav Nachman held like Rabbi Meir, that already gives him some credit. However, maybe that's not enough. So he pushes on to say, because again, you have 2 points on the rabbi's side because they're the majority, 2 points on the other Rabbi Meir's side because Rav Nachman holds like him. So now, we're a little bit stuck. So now he says, well, in addition, Perich Shvuot Shtayim Batra, Masechet Shvuot, and Daf Kaf Bet Amud Bet, Nami Mafchinan Rabbi Meir le Rabbanit. They flip who says what. They're the same machloket appears, but they flip and they say Rabbi Meir says what we thought the rabbi said here, and the rabbis say what we thought Rabbi Meir says there. So again, we have one sugya that says the majority says this, one sugya that says majority says that, but that already puts 2 points on the side of yesh meila, because we now have Rav Nachman who paskin that way, and in the sugya and shvut it appears as in the name of the rabbis, which means it's a majority opinion there. So that already tips the balance to this side, and that explains why we hold that way. And not only that, the Ran doesn't say this, but the next sugya, then we're going to have a question, and it's going to be premised on the fact that there is meila by konam also. So it's another strength to that opinion. But I wanted to point out 2 things about the Ran. Number one, how you paskin halacha from a sugya, because the sugya clearly just brings the sides and doesn't really say. And number 2, he then goes on and says, wait a minute, we've been assuming if you hold yesh meila b'konamot, then all the laws kick in. We said, right? Then if it's hekdesh forbidden to everyone, then there's pidyon, right? So now comes the Ran, he says, umistapkali, but there's one thing I'm really not clear about, and he leaves it as with lack of clarity. Man de ma'al b'konamot, the one who does meila in konamot and misuses it by accident, im mishtreahu konam lebatar demel kehekdesh sheyotze lechulin al yedei meila. One of the interesting laws about hekdesh and meila is a very interesting law. We won't get into the whole reasoning behind it, but we'll get there when we deal with it head on, which is if I misuse consecrated property. Let's say I had this loaf of bread, it was sanctified. We said that if I redeem it, it's no longer sanctified. The sanctity goes into the coin, the money. But if I eat it by accident or use it, in this case, maybe a loaf of bread isn't a great idea because it'll be gone. But let's say I use it, okay? Let's say it's, a table. And then I use the table by accident. That's misuse of consecrated property. But one of the side effects that happens is that table is no longer sanctified. By using it, I basically remove the sanctity. Also, remember, what am I going to do? I'm going to take its value plus a fifth and bring it to the temple. So it's like the value went on to the money that I now have to pay and the sanctity, and it's no longer sanctified. So now they say the following. Is that true? The Ran says for neder as well. If this loaf is forbidden to me, and then, right, or it's, again, let's not say a loaf. Let's say I said this table is forbidden to me, and then I use it. Is it no longer, right? If we assume it has sanctity, if we go by the opinion that it does have sanctity, and then if I use it, there's laws of meila, so I have to bring its value. Does that mean it's no longer sanctified or not? And he leaves it as an open question. In other words, and why is this interesting? Interesting is a question of itself, but it's interesting in terms of when we compare one thing to another, do we take the comparison only as far as the Gemara took it? Or do we take it even farther to other ramifications that the Gemara doesn't mention? And are we assuming that they just assumed and just didn't say, like meila means all these things and therefore wasn't it obvious, or the fact that they mentioned, well, also there's pidyon and not, and maybe they didn't mention this, maybe this isn't the case. So those are two interesting methodological points. Okay, moving on. Amalei Rav Ashi, again, as I told you before, this question is going to be premised on assuming there is meila in konam, in vows. He's asked Rav Ashi the following question. If I say, going back to our case, my loaf is forbidden to you, and then I give it to you as a gift, mi ma'al, where is the meila in this? Who does meila? And he's basically going to say nobody does meila, really, because lim'ol notain, if we say I did meila because I misused something that was vowed against, well, it wasn't me who was forbidden to use it. So by me giving it to you as a gift, I certainly didn't go against my vow. Because halo asira ale, this, you can't say I am liable for meila. The vow didn't include me. The vow was my loaf is forbidden to you. Definitely can't be me. Lim'ol makabel, so obviously it must be you, right? When you accepted the gift, you were moel, because it's really not yours to accept. And by accepting it into your possession, you're basically kind of acquiring it. Well, even that is a problem, says Rav Ashi, because yachol da'amal, hete'ela be'iti, sucha lo be'iti. You could say, what kind of gift is this? This is a gift that now, you give me a gift, and or I give you a gift. Because I gave you this gift, you're now going to, by accepting the gift, you now have to bring a korban asham, a guilt offering. You have to pay the value of it and a fifth. What kind of gift is that? That's not a gift that you want. It's like we saw before with shlichut. If I send someone to be my messenger and then they mess up, I say, I didn't send you to do something worse for me. I sent you to help me. And I sent you to help me, not to. So you could say, this isn't shlichut. Likewise, you could say, I didn't accept this gift had I known, obviously I gave it to you. You didn't know it was forbidden to you. But if you knew, you would have said, what kind of gift is this? Look what you just made me do. Meila really, right? Assuming there's meila, which we're assuming. So neither one would be liable for meila, not me, because I wasn't forbidden, and not you, because accepting this is really not acceptance of it. That's not acquiring it. It's a ridiculous acquiring. It's a acquiring that's going to make you responsible to pay all sorts of things. So Amarle, Rav Ashi answers him, Mikabel ma'al l'chishayotzi. Well, it's true that by accepting it alone is not enough, because you could claim, I never would have accepted this had I known what it was going to cause. But even though you might not have wanted to accept it, if you actually use it and benefit from it, that's what it means, l'chishayotzi. When, let's say, you give it to someone else as a gift, or you actually use it, you eat it, or once you do an action that you actually benefit from, in other words, getting into your possession, you could claim that wasn't a benefit for me because, look, I just had to pay out, and I got responsible for all these things. But if I actually used it and benefited, then if you used it, you're the one in the example, you used it and benefited after I gave it to you as a gift, not realizing that you were not allowed to use it, then you would be liable for meila. Why? That's the nature of the beast. That's what meila is. Meila is always, I didn't know. So if, again, accepting it, that's nothing, because you didn't really benefit, because especially if the second you accept it, you're basically liable in meila and have to pay the value, there's no benefit. But if you actually ate it, let's say, or used it for something, or gave it as a gift to someone, then you benefited, then that's like anybody else. You can't say, I didn't know had I known. That's the nature of meila. Meila is always, I didn't know, or I knew and forgot. So either which way, you can't say, I didn't know had I known, I never would have this, I never would have used it, because that's everybody. Everybody says, I never would have used it had I known. Yeah, that doesn't help. It doesn't exempt you. Okay, moving now to Amabet, new Mishna. This is a Mishna that we're going to have to wait a little bit patiently to understand most of the details of this Mishna. Most of it's going to be explained not today, because the Gemara is going to go off on a totally different question and just try to find an answer to that question in our Mishnah. And from there, we're going to get into the whole sugya kind of like in a backwards way. And over time, we're going to understand the different cases. But we're still talking about a case where I can't benefit from you, and yet there's all sorts of things you can do for me, right? We saw, let's say, machzir li aveda, you can return me my lost item. So continuing along that, there's other things you can do for me. Torema trumato u'masrotav, ma'asrotav. My truma and maaser, right? The things I have to give from my produce to the kohen, to the levi. You can do that for me, even though I can't benefit from you. Lida'ato, according to his knowledge. Okay, Gemara is going to have a big question. Number one, when you take truma and maaser on my behalf, are you doing it from your produce on my produce or from my produce on my produce? That's a question we're going to get to. And l'dato is according to whose knowledge are we talking about? Who has to be in the know about this? That's a whole thing we're going to leave for later. You can sacrifice if you're a kohen in the temple, and I'm forbidden to benefit from you specifically. I'm mudal hana'ah from you. And you are the kohen working in the temple when I brought a pair of bird sacrifices, either I was a zav or a zava or a yoledet, or I gave birth. So now, if the way it usually worked, if you remember, we learned this in Shkalim, is I would bring money, I put it in a kuppah that was a specific kuppah that was meant for these things, and the kohen would then take my money, purchase with it birds, and sacrifice it on the altar for me. Or chataot and ashamot, sin offerings and guilt offerings. So the kohen is allowed to do that on my behalf. Umilamdom, even though I can't benefit, that's not considered a benefit. Again, we're going to have to figure out why not. We'll get to this later. This we'll actually get to today. Umilamdom midrash halacha agadot. If, again, I'm not allowed to benefit from you, you can teach me midrash, which doesn't mean the way we usually think midrash of stories. No, that's agada. Okay, midrash is midrash halacha, teaching halachot from psukim. Halachot is learning the halachot, more like a Mishna type of structure where you just kind of learn the halachot, don't necessarily connect it to the Torah, and agadot, and stories. But you can't teach him Torah. Interesting distinction. Why on earth would there be a distinction? The Gemara doesn't know either. We're going to get to it later. I'm going to start into the end of tomorrow's daf, but really get the answer only on daf lamed zayin. Even though if I can't benefit from you, you can't teach me Torah, but you can teach my children Torah, because that's not direct benefit to me. Now comes a fascinating question of the Gemara. Hane kohanim. And again, right now, it's as if we're coming out of left field, and we're going to connect it to our Mishna in a minute. When kohanim work in the temple, shluchei didan havu, are they working as our messengers? Because we have sacrifices we need to bring. The kohen does the work for us in the temple, so they're basically working as our messenger. Oh, shluchei deshmaya, or are they messengers of God? To which the Gemara says, l'may nafkamina. Okay, first of all, it's a great question, right? Kohanim, are they working for us? Or are they working for God, really, right? How do we view it? So what's the relevance of this question? Well, l'may nafkamina, the Torah doesn't just like philosophical questions. They want to know what's the practical ramification. Limudal hana'ah. Well, if the kohen is not allowed to benefit from you, then, you're not allowed to benefit from the kohen. If they're acting as your messenger, that's benefiting you, right? So if you're mudar hana'ah, if you're forbidden to benefit from the kohen, if they're acting as your messenger, then you have to make sure that your sacrifice is not performed by that particular kohen. And but if they're just operating as messengers of God, share, then of course it's permitted to them, because it's permitted for them to deal with your sacrifice, because they're not working for you, they're working for God. Okay, so that's a really interesting question, an interesting ramification. What's even more interesting is that this sugya is not going to come to a conclusion. It's going to try to prove it from our Mishna. We're going to say we can't really prove it from our Mishna. But the real interesting issue, I think, is that in a different sugya, they actually answer the question. And they say that they're working as messengers of God. And why is that? Very interesting answer, makes a lot of sense. For me to act as a messenger for you, or for you to act as a messenger for me, it has to be, we say, shlucho shel adam kimoto, right? A messenger of a person is like that person. So that means if I can do it, then a messenger can do it for me. If I can't do it, so let's say I can't work in the temple because I'm not a kohen. So how can the kohen do the work for me as my messenger to do something that I myself actually can't do? So that's a big problem with this question. And in fact, the Gemara answers, since I can't do the work myself, this is in a different sugya, basically the kohen must be working as a messenger of God and not as my messenger. Because if he was working as my messenger, then he could only do what I could do. So the question is, why is the sugya even asking the question? Why are they struggling if the answer is very obvious from there? So some people say, well, the answer there is just an Amora gave a logical answer. Here they're trying to find a tannaitic source to prove it. okay? Because they're going to start with our Mishnah and say, maybe our Mishnah can give us an answer. It's always better if you can support it with an earlier text. That's one possibility. Another possibility is there is some element that a non-Kohen can do, slaughtering, for example. So maybe our sugya is asking, what about the slaughtering part? In other words, if you neutralize that issue and say, let's take something that a non-Kohen could theoretically do, and then the Kohen does it for them, maybe we're just talking about that element and not beyond. So that's just interesting in and of itself. Again, interesting and philosophical plane, not necessarily that there's so much practical to be saying about this, but it's interesting. So now the Mishnah says, well, let's learn it from our Mishnah, because what does it say? If the whole nafkamina is mudar hana'ah, that's exactly our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah say? The Kohen can do the sacrifice for you. So therefore, what are we going to assume? They must not be operating as your shaliach, right? So tashmad, it's not. Makriv alav kinei zavim. So iyamart shluchei didan, if you say he's working as your messenger, kamahanele, basically the Kohen is benefiting you. So can't be that. To which the Gemara says, rejects this entirely and says, wait a minute. If you want to say the Kohen, in a case where you are forbidden to benefit from a Kohen, the Kohen can't sacrifice a korban for you, any korban, then why did the Mishnah use some rare examples of a zava, and a yoledet? Okay, maybe yoledet, it's not so uncommon. Zav and zava, how many people really become zav and zava? So, it just should have said, a Kohen can do any sacrifice for you. And that would have proven the Kohen is a shaliach of God. And therefore, any sacrifice the Kohen can do for you. To which the Gemara says, the fact that it didn't say that, and it only brought these, it must be that these are unique. And then we're going to basically say, we can't learn from our Mishnah that they're working as your shaliach. And actually, it seems like the opposite. Okay, I'm sorry, that they're working as shlichim of God. Actually, it seems like they're working as your shaliach. Now, let's see why. What unites zavim, zavot, and yoldot? Okay, the chataot and hashemot we're going to have to deal with tomorrow. But right now, they're ignoring those words. Okay, we'll get back to those words tomorrow. But the zav and the zava and the yoledet are all in the category called mechusarei kapara. That means they each have a time period, whether it's 7 days for the zav and the zava. For the yoledet, it's either 40 or 80 days, okay, where first she's done, she has blood that's tameh, then she has blood that's pure. But the fact is, until she finishes that 40 or 80 days, boy versus girl, depending on what she gave birth to, or moving on to the zav and zava, the 7 days, on day number 8, or day number 81, or day number 41, they bring a korban in the morning. Before they bring that korban, they're called mechusarei kapara. They're missing atonement. What does that mean? They can't eat meat of sacrificial meat until they bring the sacrifice. That's what they're called. They're missing atonement. Without that atonement, they can't eat sacrificial meat. So what they do on that day, they're supposed to do it the next morning. By the way, it happens for the asham and the chatat of a mitzorah also. Same thing, we'll see that tomorrow, that in the end, they're going to say, that's what the Mishna is referring to when it says asham and chatat. But basically, they are in a unique situation called mechusarei kapara, where until they bring that sacrifice, they can't eat sacrificial meat. So comes the Gemara and says, well, based on something Rabbi Yochanan says, these people are in a different category. Why? If you want to bring a korban on someone else's behalf, forget the Kohen doing it for you. You want to bring an animal for someone else to the temple, they're obligated to sacrifice. You can only do that with their knowledge. But except for mechusarei kapara. If I want to bring a korban for you, you're a zav or a zava, and I want to bring a korban on your behalf, right? The zav is the male and the zava is the female. The male is called gonorrhea, and for the woman, it's bleeding beyond her time of her period, or not in the time when she's supposed to be getting her period anyway. It's a whole other category we're not going to talk about right now. But Rabbi Yochanan says, Sharei Adam mevi korban al banav va'al benotav ha'ktanim, shenemar zot torat hazav, ben gadol ben katan. Let's start from the end. The Torah says this is the law for the zav. Now, when they say this is the law, usually it means we're equating it for all sorts of people, which means Zot Torat HaZav is the introduction for what a zav is supposed to do when it happens and what sacrifice they're supposed to bring. Comes Rabbi Yochanan and he says that means whether it's katan or whether he's gadol, meaning even a katan brings a korban for a zav. Now, if you're a minor, you can't bring your own sacrifice. You can't buy your own animal and bring it. You don't have halacha, you're not considered a person of da'at, a person of knowledge according to halacha. So therefore, you definitely can't bring it for yourself. So if the Torah says, Zot Torat Hazav, and we learn from that, whether you're young or whether you're old, that, or whether you're a minor, whether you're not a minor, that means a parent can bring for their child without their knowledge. Why without their knowledge? Because the child doesn't have knowledge. So any korban the father is bringing for the son is going to be without the child's knowledge. Now, Rabbi Yochanan doesn't say these words inside, but the commentaries say, what Rabbi Yochanan is basically saying is that proves that we can learn what's going to be called, the Gemara doesn't say this, but the commentaries say, Efshar Misha'i Efshar, meaning, the case of a minor is someone who can't possibly do it themselves. So the father is allowed to do it for them. Now, the question is, what if you can do it yourself? Does this prove that there's no need for da'at in this type of korban, in a mechusar kapara, which means if I bring it for you, let's say you're not my son and you're not a minor, or you're not my daughter and you're not a minor, and I bring it on your behalf, can I do it without your knowledge? And Rabbi Yochanan says, yes. Since I could do it without my child's knowledge, then in Efshar, we can learn a case of Efshar. You can actually do it yourself. I can still do it for you because in the Efshar case, if it's impossible for you to do it by yourself, I can do it for you. Therefore, it must mean knowledge is not a necessary requirement for this type of korban. The knowledge of the owner, the person who's supposed to bring this korban. Therefore, where do we take this to? Mechusarei kapara, unique situation where you don't even need your knowledge, you don't need to be involved in any way, and therefore what? If the Kohen brings your sacrifice for you, he's not actually operating as a shaliach for you. Just in these cases, which means that where this Gemara is going right now is saying, it actually seems like generally a Kohen operates as your shaliach. And that's why if you're not allowed to benefit from the Kohen, then the Kohen can't do the sacrifice for you. And that's why it only listed the zava, the zava, and the yoledet, because those are in a unique category that the Kohen can do it for you without your knowledge, which means he's not operating as your shaliach, as your messenger, because you can't do something for me if I didn't send you as my messenger, if I didn't ask you to do it, if I didn't know you were doing it. So therefore, so now here comes the key thing. Again, the Mishna only brought these cases because these cases he's not operating as a shaliach, and therefore this is a whole unique category, teaches you nothing about shlichut, or teaches you nothing specifically in this case. Basically, the Kohen can do it for you and benefit for you because he's not actually operating as your shaliach, which seems to lead to, which is where we're going to start tomorrow, even though we haven't yet finished our daf, don't get excited, but I want you to know where we're ending off here, where we're starting tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to start with this question that seems to indicate from here, since the other korbanot are not mentioned, it means the Kohen can't do other korbanot. Why can't the Kohen do other korbanot? Because when the korbanot operate in a shlichut way, in a messenger way, they actually are operating as your messenger, and therefore you can't have them do it for you because they're acting as your messenger and not as the shlichim of God. So then the Gemara is going to question that assumption. Really? They're operating as your shaliach, but what about blah, blah, blah? We'll get to that. Okay, so that's where we're kind of stopping here before we tangent off, and then we're going to tangent off and get back to this tomorrow. So what they're going to struggle with right now is Rabbi Yochanan's drasha. Zot Torat Hazav, he said, includes a gadol and a katan, even a minor, which was where he got to his whole proof that these are unique exceptions to the rule. To which the Gemara says, well, the same words appear by a yoledet. These are the rules for yoledet, whether she's minor, whether she, we're going to assume whether she's a minor, whether she's not a minor. Now, the Gemara is going to ask, and you might remember this, probably it was a memorable sugya, ktana bat ledahi, a minor, okay, we didn't learn in Nedarim, so you'd have to have learned, it was in Ketubot and Yevamot, I believe. Ktana can give birth. What are you talking about? A minor girl can't give birth. How do we know? From this very famous sugya, Hatane Rabivi Kameh de Rav Nachman. Shalosh nashim meshamshot b'moch. There's 3 women who can use birth control. Okay, this was a birth control where they would basically put up some blockage that would block the semen from getting inside. There's 3 women who can do this. Okay, again, where we go with birth control, is it permitted or not? In what circumstances? It starts from here. There's obviously other heterim, other ways, but right now this source says there's 3 women, and well, it's complicated to get the whole thing, but anyway, this So it says there's 3 women who can use birth control. Who are they? Ktana, a minor, me'uberet, a pregnant woman, and a minikan, a woman who's nursing. Ktana, we're not going to get into the me'uberet and minikan today's Gemara, but ktana, why? Shema titaber v'tamut. Maybe she'll get pregnant, and if she does, she'll die. There was an assumption that a minor can't manage to give birth. If you remember, when we learned it then, there were 2 ways to read this, whether the Shema applies to both. Maybe she'll get pregnant and maybe she'll die, or maybe she'll get pregnant. If she gets pregnant, she'll definitely die. This sugya seems to read it as, and she'll definitely die, and therefore, there's no way that we could be talking about a minor bringing a korban of a yoledet. There's no way. So your drasha that you premised everything on of zot Torah zav ben gadol ben katan doesn't seem to work for yoledet, because zot Torah yoledet doesn't mean ben katana ben gadol. There's no such thing as a katana who gives birth. To which the Gemara said, don't question that. Zot Torah yoledet includes something else. Hahi zot Torah yoledet, which is something we're also going to come back to in another sugya tomorrow. Ben pikachat ben shota, whether she's clear-headed or whether she has limited mental capabilities. Okay, if she has limited mental capabilities, which means that she doesn't have da'at, her husband can still bring a korban on her behalf. Okay, if she's a yoledet, or maybe even other korbanot, which we'll talk about tomorrow. Kidivrei Rabbi Yehuda, as Rabbi Yehuda says, Titania. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Adam mevi korban ashir al ishto. We'll talk about that in a minute, what that means. A man can bring an expensive korban on behalf of his wife, v'chol korbanot shechayevet, and all korbanot that she's obligated in. Sheken kotev la, where is it learned from? Achrayut le'alach min kadmat dinan. If you remember in Ketubah, we had this whole question, can you darshan words of the Ketubah? So this obviously thinks you can. In the Ketubah it says, I will take responsibility for anything that you need. So this means that if a wife is supposed to bring a korban, let's say, she doesn't have da'at, okay? She's limited mental capabilities. She's not considered a woman with da'at, with knowledge, according to halacha, and she has a baby. So her husband can bring a korban on her behalf. So Rabbi Yehuda learns it from the drasha of the Ketubah, and what he says is even more. What's this korban ashir? Well, there's different korbanot that are called sliding scale korbanot, where depending on if you're wealthy or if you're poor, you bring something different. Could be a meal offering. If you're really poor, if you're average poor, you bring birds. If you're more wealthy, you can bring an animal. And there's different kinds of korban, what you substitute for what. I'm not going to get into all the details. But if generally, we know this from Ketubah, women didn't own land, property, etc. Once in a while, maybe they got something in inheritance, but usually they didn't really own anything. So all women theoretically are poor. So if a woman has to bring a korban like that, you'd say, oh, she brings them the least. But no, if a husband is bringing on his wife's behalf, it goes by, and even if not, really, the wife is judged by the husband. It goes by his wealth, not her wealth, because they're married. So he brings a korban ashir. That means if he's wealthy, even though she personally isn't, it goes by his wealth, and therefore he would bring that kind of korban for his wife, and that's why it says, I'm taking responsibility for all your financial needs, so that their financial status is based on his and not on hers. But what was the main point? The zot Torah yoled, it doesn't, and it's not a problem, it doesn't mean ben ktana, because minors don't give birth, and that doesn't question our Torah zav. It's coming to include that a yoled that brings a korban, even if she's a shotan, doesn't have mental capabilities, then he brings it on her behalf. And that's what it teaches you. The husband can bring this korban on her behalf. That was a side issue, which is, we're going to come back to it, as I said, in the Gemara tomorrow, because they're going to go back to revisit this in another way. But basically, the main thing we tried to get to right now was, before we really understand all these cases in the Mishna, which we don't really get why you're allowed to do all these things for other people and why you can't, let's say, teach Torah, for example, that we'll get to later. But the main question was, again, fascinating question, when a Kohen does a sacrifice on your behalf, is he operating as your messenger, or is he operating as the messenger of God? The nafkamina would be, the relevant practical difference would be, if you can't benefit from that Kohen, is that Kohen allowed to do a sacrifice for you? Right now, we seem to indicate he can't, because the Mishna didn't mention it, only in this unique category, which doesn't need your knowledge, which means it doesn't need messenger, really. You know, the Kohen's not acting as your messenger, because anyone can really do it for you without even your knowledge. And therefore, we would say, it sounds like the Kohen is acting as your messenger, because if not, it would have listed the Kohen could do all sorts of other korbanot for you. That's what we'll start off in tomorrow's class. Wishing everyone a good day, and reminder that there's no Zoom tomorrow, but class will be up as usual, even earlier than usual, early in the morning. By 6 o'clock, it'll be up there, Israel time, and you can learn it on your own. Have a great day, everyone.